All right, boys and girls, we're going to look at a type of math that is really going to be with you for a long time, and that is what's called order of operations. Or you might hear teachers call this PEMDAS. And PEMDAS, you can actually see on the right side of this page here, is a mnemonic code that you could use to help you remember the order that you take when you solve these problems. And so um, this is kind of an extension on numerical expressions. So we looked at some numerical expressions at the first part of the week, and then now we're going to kind of just go a little bit deeper into it with what are called order of operation problems or PEMDAS problems. So let's first look at the right side of this page. The mnemonic code that is used for these problems that we refer to as PEMDAS is please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Now, those words really don't mean anything in math. Those words basically just mean, there's something that's kind of silly that you can remember, and you can use that to help you kind of go through this math if you ever get in trouble. So when you're in trouble and you're thinking about, what PEMDAS really means, what you've got to understand is the please excuse my dear Aunt Sally part is, that's just the part where basically you're remembering the first letter of each word. But the part that really comes into play is you've got to understand what does that letter represent when it comes to math. So we're going to go through this real quick. The please represents parentheses, which you can kind of see in the picture here, and I'm going to just kind of circle. So if you're seeing a set of parentheses, you know that that's always going to come first in these problems. So if you see parentheses, you know that that's where your eyes need to gravitate towards. You need to look at that part first. The other part that I'm going to kind of draw into this is you also have to think about what are called brackets. And brackets kind of look like parentheses. They're a little bit more squared off on the corners. They kind of look like a part of a box or like the side of a box. But you have one that kind of looks like a capital C, and then you have one that kind of looks like a backwards capital C. And that's some that you also need to take into consideration because you will see problems with brackets. And so if you see that also is coming first. Then you work your way down the PEMDAS. So the next letter is E for excuse. That actually represents something called exponents. Now, the thing about exponents are they are extremely important, but for fifth grade, we don't have to worry about them. And what I mean by that is you guys will never see an exponent on a test. You see exponents occasionally in math in fifth grade, and where you might see an exponent is if you were doing an area problem or if you were doing a volume problem. And so your teachers might talk about exponents then. But when it comes to order of operations, you really don't have to worry about it. So we teach it, we talk about it, but you don't really ever see it. So we're going to kind of go through that one pretty quick. All right, the next one going down the list here, it says my or dear. So the my, obviously with the symbol there, represents multiplication, or dear represents division. The one thing that you got to keep in mind with those two are that they are equals. And so a lot of times when I'm writing out my PEMDAS strategy, like if I want to write it out for like help or if I need to look at something to help me guide me through a problem, and I'm going to kind of try to do this out to the side, but I'm going to write it to where basically they're beside each other. And that's because when you're solving when you're solving a problem that's dealing with order of operations or PEMDAS, you have to know that multiplication and division are equals. You really don't have one that's ahead of the other. When you look at this particular set of notes, how it's written out, if you don't catch this word or, you're going to be in trouble because a lot of times kids, when they do this, and in fact, I think I did this when I was a kid. When I was learning PEMDAS, I thought, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally meant that multiplication came first because it was if I'm looking at the PEMDAS here on the side of the page, it comes first before the D. Really, they're equals. And so we're going to kind of see what that means here in a little bit when we practice some problems. So that's important. Obviously, the deer means to divide. But then you get down to the last two. You get down to Aunt Sally, and Aunt obviously is for addition and Sally is for subtraction, because you can see there. But again, you have to notice the word or. It's addition or subtraction. So when I'm writing it out, I might put these two beside each other because, again, they're equals. And you really got to understand what that means. What that means is when you're solving a problem, if it has both addition and subtraction in it, you really have to go to the next thought process that goes along with PEMDAS, and that comes right here. I'm going to put a little star. And that is, you always work your problems from left to right. So when you're working these problems out and you're practicing, you got to keep really two things in mind. And it's kind of tricky because you have to think of these things simultaneously. So at the same time, you have to think of PEMDAS in that order. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Or at the same time, you have to think, okay, well, I'm going to work it from left to right. So really and truly, the easiest way to get it down is to practice it. So on this particular page, we use this for notes every year. There's some problems right where it says practice. And so I'm going to work through these with you. And we're going to work through several, but just kind of listen to my thinking as I do this. Okay, so look at this first problem. I'm going to put a little check here. So this is kind of where we are. So we're at the problem 3 plus 7 times 6 divided by 3. Okay, so what I have to do on this problem is I have to use PEMDAS. The first thing on PEMDAS is parentheses or brackets. Well, I don't see either on this problem. So the next thing I'm going to go towards, because I don't use exponents, so E is kind of out, I'm going to go to the multiplication and the division. Well, I see both on this problem. I see multiplication and division. So what I have to think about is if I'm going from left to right, what my first step is going to be. And my first step on this problem is going to be 7 times 6. And that's because when I'm thinking left to right and PEMDAS simultaneously, multiplication and division are the same, but since I'm going left to right as well, that problem comes first. So watch how this works. So 7 times 6 is going to give me 42. Okay, from there, I'm basically going to drop everything that I did not use. So watch how this works. So I'm going to drop the 3. I did not use that. Whoops, wrong button. I'm going to drop the 3 down. I did not add, so I'm going to drop that down. I'm going to drop down the division symbol, and then I'm going to drop down the 3. Really, the only thing that I use on that first step was 7 times 6. All right, so now it's kind of like, I'll tell my students when they work this, it's like you go through like levels. Like you've just hit your first problem, that's done. Now you're going down to the next level, and then you might go to the next level and the next level. So you just kind of keep working down until you find an answer. So now I'm looking at 3 plus 42 divided by 3. Well, I see a plus or an addition problem, and then I see a division problem, and I know if I'm using please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, addition's almost at the bottom, so I know that division problem is going to come next. And so now I've got to look at this problem and think, okay, well, I've got 42 divided by 3. All right, well, 42 divided by 3, I'm going to go ahead and do that without showing it here just for the sake of time. If you were to do 42 divided by 3, I believe, I'm going to have to double check myself here. Yeah, I think it's going to be 14. So I'm going to write 14 underneath it. And then basically I'm going to do the same thing I did earlier. I'm going to drop down the stuff I didn't use. Well, I didn't use the 3. I did not use the addition symbol. And so now I'm looking at basically one more problem to find my answer. And it's just a simple addition problem. 3 plus 14 gives me 17. And 17 is my final answer. So what, and again, when you work these problems, you kind of just keep going and going and going, and you drop down. You always kind of think when you solve these, it's kind of hard to see it here, but I always tell my kids when you solve them, if you solve them correctly, you kind of create, this upside down triangle, or what I call like a Dorito chip. And when you create that Dorito chip, you know that you're on the right track because you're doing something right, and that's how they should look. A big mistake on these, big mistake, or when kids want to solve these mentally. You don't want to solve these in your head. I've had kids that are really good mathematicians, and they could do a lot of math in their head. They're really good at mental math, and they can get some of these right. But it's really, really important that you show your work and you show your different levels there as you go down your page when you solve these. And that's because, one, you're going slow and you're not going to make a silly mistake. Two, you could see them in levels. And so it's just important to not get ahead of yourself and try to solve it. You know, I think kids do it sometimes because they try to impress their teachers. You're not going to impress them by doing that. You're going to impress them by doing what you've been taught, and that is to show your work. Okay. If you go to the middle problem, this problem is a little bit different because it has a parenthesis or a set of parentheses. So this problem would look 6 times 4 in parentheses divided by 3 minus 6 plus 2. That's the whole problem. So if I were to solve this problem, I definitely know where to go to first because I see a set of parentheses. So I'm going to go, and I definitely want to look at that part first, which is just a math fact, 6 times 4. So I'm going to go ahead and solve that, and I'm going to write 24 in here. But then I want to go, and I want to kind of basically drop everything else down that I haven't used. So I did not use the division symbol, so I'm going to do that. I didn't use the 3, the minus 6, the plus 2. Basically, it all falls down with it. Haven't done anything with those. Now I'm looking at a new level. 24 divided by 3 minus 6 plus 2. Okay. Don't see any parentheses there. I don't want to drop the parentheses down because I've used those. In other words, I've solved what's in those parentheses. So those aren't going to come down anymore. But what I am looking at now is I'm looking at, basically a division problem, a subtraction problem, and an addition problem. Well, if I go to please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, division's going to be ahead of addition and subtraction. So my next problem is 24 divided by 3, which is simple. It's just a math fact. It's 8. The minus 6 drops down. The plus 2 will drop down. And then I just basically keep going. All right. I'm almost to the point where I'm finished. But now I'm looking at, again, this is that part where you have to think simultaneously. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, and left to right. Because now I've got an addition problem and a subtraction problem. And they're equals. And so since they're equals, then I have to think, all right, what comes first, left to right? Well, left to right is 8 minus 6. That comes first. And so that's a simple problem, but a lot of kids might flip it around and think, okay, well, 6 plus 2 needs to come first because they look at please excuse my dear Aunt Sally and they think addition is going to be above subtraction. That's not the case here. Subtraction comes first because they're equals. And so now 8 minus 6 is going to give me 2 plus 2 that haven't used yet. I'm going to drop that down and I get 2 plus 2. 2 plus 2 is going to give me my final answer of 4. And then you can really see that Dorito chip there on that one. Okay, the last problem off these notes, 2 times, open parentheses, 9 divided by 3, close parentheses, really is probably the easiest one out of the 3. But you will see that they shifted the parentheses all the way to the right. Well, okay, so what? They'll do that because they're trying to fool you and they're trying to think, okay, well, how can we get the student to get confused here? Well, don't let it confuse you. Go back to what you know. Parentheses comes first. So my first step on this problem is 9 divided by 3, which is simply just 3. The 2 in the times is going to fall down. The parentheses won't because I'm done with those now. But the 2 in the multiplication symbol, that falls down, and then you're left simply with the answer of 6. And even though it's not a very big one, you can still get your Dorito chip here. So, really and truly, it's a lot here on this page, on this one page, but it's very important. This set of notes, this page of notes, is extremely important for where you're about to head to. All right, let's look at a couple extra practice problems. This one here contains, no parentheses. It has some multiplication and addition, and so we need to follow the steps here. Watch how I'm going to write this, though. I'm going to write PEMDAS out just kind of as a guide, but as I write this, I'm going to write it a little bit differently than the notes, and I'm going to kind of add a couple things here at the bottom. When I tell my students to solve these problems, if they need help, this out to the side is really a good kind of a guide, a good strategy to always have in the back of your mind if you need some help. Notice here and here how I put multiplication and division as equals and addition and subtraction as equals. And I also added a little note at the bottom, you got to go from left to right. So let's look at this problem. This problem is 3 times 4 plus 3 times 2. So if I look at this and I use PEMDAS, no parentheses, there's no brackets. 3 times 4 is pretty basic. 3 times 4 plus 3 times 2 is a pretty basic problem, but you got to know where to go first. So 3 times 4 is going to be my first step, and that's because multiplication is above addition. So I'm going to solve that, and then watch. Everything else I don't use just drops down. All right, I got a new level here. Watch yourself, though. Don't fly through these. So it's 12 plus 3 times 2. If I go back to PEMDAS and left to right, here's where it could be tricky. If I only think left and right, 12 plus 3 is going to be what I go to first. But if I do left to right and PEMDAS is really going to say, okay, if I look at what's left, multiplication comes before addition. And so I have to think, okay, these two aren't equals. See, I could think left to right if they were equals, but they're not equals. Multiplication is above addition. So my next step is actually 3 times 2. And then the plus 12 falls down because I haven't used it. And then I just finish it. And then all I have left is 12 plus 6. 12 plus 6 is going to give me 18. There's your Dorito chip. All right, let's do this one more problem for practice here. So we're looking at 6 plus 7 times 3 minus 8 divided by 2. Man, that's a mouthful. Okay, not hard though if we go slow. There, I'm going to come out to the side. Again, this one might be really helpful to you if you learn to do this. So I'm just going to go a little faster here. So I've got left to right. I've got my PEMDAS there. I'm going to look at my problem. All right, no parentheses, no brackets. I'm going to go straight to what comes first. In this problem, 7 times 3 comes first, because multiplication and division are equals. So I see a division problem over here, but since I have to see them as equals, left to right comes into play. 7 times 3 is first. So I'm going to write that answer, which is 21. The 6 and the plus falls down. The minus 8 falls down. The divided by 2 falls down. Didn't use any of that stuff. The next level, 6 plus 21 minus 8 divided by 2, I'm looking at, all right, I've got addition, subtraction, division. Well, division kind of is, top dog there on PEMDAS. It's going to be solved first. So 8 divided by 2 is going to be 4. Watch everything else just falls. Nothing else was used there. And then now I'm looking at 6 plus 21 minus 4. Again, you've got two things here that are equals. Addition and subtraction are equals. So you go from left to right. Left to right, 6 plus 21 gives you 27. And then minus 4 drops. And then I'm almost through with this problem. I've got 27 minus 4. 27 minus 4 is going to be 23. And then there's my Dorito chip. So to kind of end these notes here on some of these problems, just keep in mind, this is definitely new. You guys did not have order of operations in 4th grade. But what you did have were a lot of these problems, because you just see some basic math in here. I mean, a lot of times you just see math facts. So the math is not too difficult. It's just knowing what to do and when to do it. So you got to really practice, and practice makes perfect. I've said that a lot on these videos. You got to really practice this stuff if you want to be good.